Okay, folks, it's a good evening. Well, it's a good evening here in the studios of Radio FM 88 Australia, and of course our UK audience is in the morning. So it's currently 9 o'clock just over there in the morning, and without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our co-host, Priti Pauline. It's a good morning to you, Priti.
Well, good morning, Jeff. It's a delight to be here on a fairly crisp, again, Thursday morning in the UK. And I have today with me Patricia Horsman, who is living near in Sussex, near Gatwick Airport. And she has a tremendous history of taking children to Lourdes on a pilgrimage. So I would like to say hello and good morning, Patricia. How are you today?
Hello and good morning, Pauline, or should I call you Priti? Which one would you prefer?
Either is fine.
Oh, either, that's fine. Yeah. Yes, good morning. And I too am living, as you said, in West Sussex, not very far at all from Gatwick Airport. In fact, it's a mile, and our house is parallel to the runway. And so we get to watch people flying off in all sorts of directions, which is really nice. I like to sit in the garden watching the planes take off and pondering as to where they're going and what they're doing and why they're doing it and who they're with and all sorts of things. But it's nice to sit and to watch them taking off. Very odd things. Yeah. I enjoy it. I like doing it.
And yes, presumably at some point you're going to get on a plane and go to Lourdes. How do you get there?
Well, I will get on a plane, but sadly not from Gatwick, because after many years, the flights from Gatwick to Lourdes were changed or got rid of, and now we have to go to London Stansted to fly to Lourdes direct from there. But you can fly there from Manchester or Birmingham or other airports all around the place. But for London and here, it's Stansted to Lourdes, and a very early morning flight, to say too.
All right then, so pretty amount of dedication in order just to get there in the first instance.
Well, so, yes.
Tell us, how did your connection with Lourdes come to pass? I read in your biography that quite some time ago, your first encounter had quite an immense impact on your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I first encountered the idea of going to Lourdes because at school you never really learnt about places like that. It was all Catholic catechism and all the rest of it. But when I finished school and went to college at that time, I went to a place called St Mary's College, as it was then, in Strawberry Hill in Twickenham, which was run by a group of Vincentian fathers, the Congregation of Mission Fathers. So it was a Catholic college, small. It only had a couple of thousand students. And when I was there in my first year in 1980, there was a very inspiring chaplain there called Father Perry Goudet, who was one of the Vincentian fathers. And a couple of years previous to that, he had a long association with HCPT at the time, and he, using his work as the college chaplain, had set up a group called Sims Lourdes. And Sims Lourdes was made up of students who would join the pilgrimage as extra helpers. And when you got to Lourdes, you were placed into, I'll explain later on about what the family groups are, but you were placed into a family group and you spent the week within that family group helping out with children who had various disabilities, many of whom had quite severe disabilities in those days. And in order to go, you had to do lots of fundraising to pay for your fare, which was quite cheap in those days. I think it was about £150 because we were students and we could subsidise. It got subsidised. I travelled with Sims Lourdes as part of that group in 1981, at Easter, and it just had a very profound effect on me. The whole place, the whole idea of that sense of journey, starting not just before Easter, but starting at the beginning of the academic year, and then building in intensity until you actually travelled. And in those days, travel was by train. And there used to be a train that ran from Victoria. There were actually 3 trains that ran across from different parts of the country, and they were called the red train, the white train, and the blue train. And the one we got went from Victoria, and so we all had to go to Victoria, and then you travelled down to Dover, got on a ferry across to Dover, all piled off of the trains at that point, because the trains used to be able to go on the ferries in those days. Later on they couldn't, but the train would go onto the ferry, and you would then get off of the ferry in
Calais?
No, not Calais, Boulogne.
Boulogne.
You went to Boulogne in those days, and then you got off of the train, and everybody got on another train and travelled overnight from Boulogne down to Lourdes, which is practically traversing the whole of France, because Lourdes is way down in the south of France, and Boulogne and later on Calais, as you can see, are in the north. So it was very much a journey, and pilgrimage is a journey. It's all about going to places of significance. It doesn't have to be a holy journey. A pilgrimage can be anywhere to somewhere, going to somewhere that has significance for you or meaning. So if you're a Manchester United fan, your pilgrimage might be to Old Trafford and doing a tour and meeting the players. And for you, that could be life-changing. So pilgrimage is very much about going on a journey, not alone, because you can pilgrimage alone, but then you don't get that same sense of being, well, you're not with other people. And so in order to be a pilgrim, you have to be on a journey with other people. And so the journey for us started in Twickenham and ended up in Lourdes. And because of that chaplain, Father Perry Gilday, it was because of him that I got involved at that stage indirectly with HCPT, because I travelled again with Sims Lewis the following year, and then it came to finals and exams and deciding what my career was going to be. And so I didn't go back to it then until 1986 and travelled to Easter 1987. So yes, I've had a long association with it, firstly as a student and then later on as a teacher in a Catholic girls' secondary school in Croydon, which is in South London.
So any journey can be a pilgrimage if you're doing it with another person. Is that a succinct definition?
No, a pilgrimage needs to be with other people. Otherwise, it's a solitary journey. But a pilgrimage is all about being with other people, having a lived and shared experience, going to places that maybe challenge you or interest you. But certainly, pilgrimage is a journey, a sense of journey. And you need the journey, because you can't pilgrimage at home. I can't go on a pilgrimage into Crawley, because you have to leave home and go to another place. And to do that, yes, you can do it by yourself, but the true pilgrimage is with other people, because it's a shared experience. And that, for many people, pilgrimage is a spiritual journey for whatever reason. For others, it is something going to places of meaning or importance for them. But it's all about sharing that experience as well as doing the journey. And the important thing about pilgrimage is the journey. It's not necessarily the getting there. And then the other part of pilgrimage is once you're there and you've experienced it, you then journey home. And what do you do with that experience when you're home? So pilgrimage is about transforming lives, changing lives, be it your own or somebody else's, in my opinion.
Okay, that's a good enough opinion for me. And tell me, what was it about that first time in 1981 when you first went to Lourdes? What was it about the whole journey of going there that had this immense impact on your life that you've continued doing it for another 40 odd years?
That's a really good question, because obviously 1981 was a long time ago, but it was the sense of being part of something bigger than yourself. And it was part of giving with no thought of getting. And you were working with children, some of whom had severe disabilities. And in those days, a lot of the children that travelled had severe disabilities of some form or other. Some of them had life-limiting conditions. Some of them were wheelchair-bound. Some of them couldn't communicate. But they were brought to this place by this organisation at that time called HCPT, which stood in the 1980s for Handicapped Children's Pilgrimage Trust. And it was about taking children to Lourdes for a pilgrimage holiday. So they were going to Lourdes, which is primarily a Catholic shrine, and it was a Catholic charity in those days. Now it's much broader and a Christian-based charity with its Catholic foundation. But it was that sense of going to be with people who wanted to give, to help, and to have fun, but in a spiritual way, because there's two sides to the going to Lourdes with HCPT. One is the spiritual side, and that is a very, very important part of the pilgrimage, which underpins it. And the second part was taking children on holiday. So it was a mixture of the two things. And it was being surrounded by people who paid for the privilege of going to a foreign country. You know, in 1980s, I don't know how much people travelled in the 1980s, but it was the first time I'd ever been anywhere apart from Ireland. And it was, oh no, that's not quite true. It's first time by myself going to somewhere apart from Ireland. And it was that sense of you were all there with a shared purpose to help these children in a different country, having a holiday that with Mary is what they used to call it, going on holiday with Mary and having fun, and also having that very profound spiritual experience. And I don't know, it just touched me in some way or other. And I can't really describe it, but it made an impact. And I did it twice as a student. And then when I went into the teaching profession, it was something that had such a profound effect that I wanted to share it with the girls, the students that I taught. And so that's how it all kind of came about. But that's another story, long story.
Yeah. So how did that come about? How did the girls in the sixth form, was it that?
Yeah.
How did they receive it? Did the idea come from them, or did you present it to them? What was it that? Because that must have been a blooming effect from that point on to set something up that had a lasting effect for 40 odd years.
Well, it did, yes. I mean, the way it came about was there was the head teacher at the school at the time was a lady called Margaret Dolan. How was it? Sister Mary Gabriel. One of the two of them. I think it was Sister Mary Gabriel. And I spoke to her about this. I was a very young teacher in those days, you know, young, enthusiastic. And I had been so touched by this experience as an 19-year-old, 19-year-old, that I wanted other people to have that experience as well. I wanted them to share in that experience. And it was a leap of faith, really, because I went to, I have to say, I can't quite remember which the head teacher was, but I went to the head teacher. She was either one of the sisters, Sister Mary Gabriel, or it was Margaret Dolan. And Margaret Dolan herself had a profound impact on me because of the nature of the woman that she was. She was a wonderful woman, you know, very humble, very quiet, but incredibly supportive. And she supported me throughout that time afterwards until she eventually died. So anyway, going back to it, I went to talk to the head teacher about what I had done as a student, and she thought it was a good idea. And that was in probably 1986 and early 1986 in the academic year, which here runs from September. And I'd spoken to her, and then I had to approach the chief executive of HCPT at that time, who was a man called Pat Porter, and they were based in a presbytery in Sutton. You know, presbytery attached to a Catholic church in Sutton. And I went to speak to him about it and about my idea of bringing a group of sixth formers, lower sixth formers, so that meant they were aged 16 or 17, and bringing them as part of the pilgrimage as extra helpers. Because of their age, they were too young to have responsibility for looking after a child, but they could be placed in a group and assist with that group. Now, that was the experience that I had as a student, was that when you traveled, you were placed into one of these family groups and you spent the week there with the group, living in the hotel, sharing in everything that they did. And I wanted the girls to have a similar, they couldn't have the same experience because they weren't old enough, but to have a similar experience of being placed into a group and spending the working hours, if you like, but working hours were really from 7 until 10 at night for them.
Yeah.
And spending all that time with these groups and the children, helping in any way they could. And in those days, that could have included not intimate care, but assisting with some personal care, like helping wash faces and hands, and accompanying children to the toilet, but not being in the toilet with them. That kind of, I don't know, it's a bit of a weird thing to say, but it was that kind of being part of their care, but not at a very intimate level. Again, because they weren't old enough to do that. And with those girls, I think it was 6 or 8 girls I took at the time, the first group, seeing them going from shy, scared young women to, by the end of the week, being more confident, more moved, driven, I don't know what the word would be, but changed. And it was...
So the experience.
Changed by the experience, because... yeah, changed by the experience. And I don't know, it excited me, it moved me, it made me want to do it again and again and again
and again and again
and again. Yeah. But I mean, I think I need to explain a little bit about HCPT, what it is, and what I mean by family groups, because without that context, it doesn't make any sense. So just to explain that HCPT was started, as you mentioned, 70 years ago by a man called Dr. Michael Strode. And Dr. Michael was obviously a qualified doctor, and he was, at that time, he worked at a school in West Sussex called Chailey Lodge. And it was a school for children with disabilities. And in the 1950s, children with disabilities were hidden. You know, they were often institutionalized, or they were sent away to special schools, boarding schools, whatever you want to call it. They were sent to places like that, and they were out of sight, out of mind, primarily. And so he worked at Chailey Lodge, and he used to see lots of children being taken off on holiday or going to nice places and doing things, but the Catholic children didn't go anywhere. And so he began to take just a small group, you know, 4, 5, 6 children to Lourdes, and he wanted them to have an experience that other people had, because at the time, when sick pilgrims went to Lourdes, they were put in hospitals, they were put in institutions, and they kind of came out for processions, and then they went back in, and that's where they were cared for. But he didn't want that. He wanted his children to have the same experience that other people would have. And so now it doesn't sound that groundbreaking, but the children went to live and to stay in the hotels that were there, or a hotel that was there. I don't ask me which one, because I don't know. But they stayed in a hotel. Now, you have to bear in mind, these are the 1950s, and things for people with disabilities were not like they are now. So it was an immense job, I suppose, and the job isn't the right word. It was an immense challenge to take just a small group of children across the country, bearing in mind you wouldn't necessarily have the flights. It might have to be by coach, it might have to be by train. And these children, many of them were wheelchair bound. So you can imagine the challenge that there was of taking these children to Lourdes, but he wanted them to have the same experience that an able-bodied person would have. And over the years, what he did began to grow a little bit, and then soon after there were not just one group of children, but a larger group of children, and it became 2 groups, and then other people were interested in it, and it grew and it grew and it grew. And the format for it, for the Easter pilgrimage, because there are pilgrimages that go on throughout the season, and the season pilgrimage in Lourdes runs from a couple of weeks after Easter until October. So that there's 2 aspects to HCPT. One at the time was simply the HCPT and taking children on an Easter pilgrimage at Easter to Lourdes. And it was in the school holidays, so it didn't interrupt education or anything like that. So as it grew, the groups then became what they call family groups. And that meant that you had a group of, say, anywhere between 2 and 10, maybe 12, but 12 is large, children, and each child had their own individual carer, not a family member. You could be, but not normally. So they would have their own individual appointed carer who would get to know the child prior to the pilgrimage and their needs and what their particular requirements were. Within that group, then you would have a nurse, a chaplain, a group leader, and a deputy group leader. So you could have a group of, say, up to 30 people as a family group. And then the family group just started to get numbered. So the groups are known by their number and by their colour, because the story of Noah and the ark and the rainbow I don't know how that came about, but that became the focus, this story of Noah bringing the animals into the ark and the rainbow. So it began to be known as the Rainbow Pilgrimage, because every group created its own identity and they chose a particular color, and they used to have bobble hats and all sorts of things, all different words. And anyway, I digress. So they these were the family groups, and so each family group is organizes its own program, but there is also a central program. I don't know if this is making sense or not, but they would organize their own week and the activities that they would do within that week, but with the full knowledge that this is a pilgrimage. And so the spiritual side is equally as important as the holiday side. So all of it, the spiritual and the holiday part, were all intertwined in one. And so each family group organized its own program for the week with the spiritual focus. And then there were times during the week when all the groups get together as one big trust. All right. So I hope that makes kind of sense. And these groups come now from all over the country. So they come from England, Scotland, Wales, and originally Ireland as well, north and south. And then over a period of time, the IHCPT, as it was known then, created its own separate pilgrimage trust and became known as the IPT, the Irish Pilgrimage Trust. But so the groups came from all over the country, and each of us had a number, and you were very proud of your group number, because that was you. And that group together would raise funds so that the children, everything that the children do is paid for. The families and the children do not pay for anything to go on the pilgrimage. And all the children are sponsored, so the group has to raise the money to pay for the children's fares to go to Lourdes, and then in addition to that, they will then raise more additional funds to buy the group kit. They will raise funds to have cafe visits morning and afternoon. They will raise funds to take the children out on day trips to different places. And so you've got that balance of the spiritual and the fun, the holiday side of it. But all children, no child, if the parents want to contribute and donate, that's a different thing. But no child no family has to pay for them to go on the pilgrimage. It is all completely done through sponsorship and an awful lot of hard work. And now the trust has grown and grown and grown to the extent that groups now, as I said, come from England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, but they also come from Belgium, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Ireland I've mentioned. There's a group from Italy, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Spain, Switzerland, several groups from the United States, and from the couple from the West Indies. And they all converge on Lourdes from Easter Sunday through to the following Sunday. And,
so Easter is a particularly significant time of year then?
Yes, because it's celebrating the resurrection of Jesus within the Christian faith. But it's not just about the children's pilgrimage. And at one point, it's probably not quite the same now, but at one point it was the largest children's pilgrimage in the world. And in the days, well, probably the 1990s, 2000s, you could have almost 10,000 people on pilgrimage with the HCPT at that time. But that would include kind of the support workers and everybody else as well. But I suppose 10,000 would be on the big occasions like the big anniversaries, the 30th, 40th, 50th. but largely it'd probably be 6 to 7 normally. But numbers recently have been falling because of lots of constraints, particularly money. But that's one aspect to it. The other side of the trust is what you, excuse me, what was called Hosanna House Trust. And Hosanna House came about because the children who travel with HCPT are generally aged 7 to 18. And when they get to 18, they're young adults. They're not children anymore. They're young adults. And so they were no longer allowed to travel at being 18, but they still wanted to travel. And so there was, I don't know if you call it a campaign or lots of discussion about how could the trust continue to meet the needs of these young adults as they had passed on from being children. And so the trust bought a former hotel in the village of Bartres, which is a few miles outside of Lourdes. And they created, with a lot of work, they created Hosanna House. And Hosanna House became a centre of pilgrimage for young people, older young people, to be able to go on pilgrimage, continue to go on pilgrimage, but not being part of a family group.
Wow.
And then Hosanna House started to welcome pilgrims throughout the year. And so groups of people, not just young adults, but people from very young babies through to the very elderly would go on pilgrimage to Hosanna House and stay there.
Yeah.
And again, over time, it was recognised that it wasn't big enough. And so there was a program of building program, and the hotel was extended to create another wing. So there are now 2 wings to it, and in the centre of the two wings is the chapel. It's a very beautiful chapel in the middle, and it is out in the mountains, and it is absolutely beautiful to be there. I've been there many times and stayed there many times, and you can go out on the terraces. You can wake up in the morning to the sound of cowbells and sheep bells, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And so that was to cater for those who perhaps couldn't travel at Easter but still wanted to go on pilgrimage. They didn't necessarily want to go and stay in the hotels, and this was an option for them. And so eventually the two trusts, the HCPT and the Hosanna House Trust, merged into one to become the Hosanna House and Children's Pilgrimage Trust, but still with the same ideals, the same values, the same goals of to go on pilgrimage to Lourdes. Sometimes they're called some of the phrases are life-changing pilgrimage, or life-changing pilgrimage, or changing lives through pilgrimage. So I can see on the screen there are various pictures popping up. That one there is the 2 wings of Hosanna House, and the 2 things that in the middle are where the chapel is. And it's a very, very beautiful place. But again, all of it is for those pilgrimages for the summer groups. They call the summer groups. They're self-financing, unless there are reasons why somebody would like to go on pilgrimage but can't, then money will be raised to support them going. But those are self-financing, whereas the children's pilgrimage at Easter is all sponsored.
Hey, can I just stop you there? Hey, I think we've really covered that ground pretty thoroughly. I just want to bring your attention to what I discovered here on your YouTube channel. It was really interesting there. You got the first, and it goes right through to the 12th apparition of Our Lady of Lourdes. Can you bring us up to speed what they that seems to be the central focal point for people to go to Lourdes in the first place, where the apparition took place in the grotto.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on all that? And is that why the Catholics sort of made it a place of...
Yeah, I mean, it's I've always marveled at why there and why then, because Lourdes is in the Pyrenees, the Hope Pyrenee they call it. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it was the apparitions, the visions of Our Lady, the Mother of Jesus, were to a sick, illiterate child. And I've always been fascinated as to why. But anyway, what it is that Bernadette Subaru was the daughter, one of several children of Francois and I've forgotten her mother's name, Louisa, I think, maybe. I'll have to check that. But she was one of the older children, and she was a very sickly child. And when she was a baby, her mother was badly burned, and she was sent to a wet nurse because she was a baby. She needed breastfeeding, and she was sent to a wet nurse, a kind of foster mum, in Bartres. So that's the link to Bartres. So she was sent there as a baby, and the foster mother kind of fell in love with the child and didn't want to give her back. But she did eventually go home at the age of 2. And her parents were millers in Lourdes town, and they lived quite a decent life, quite a reasonable life, and it was quite financially comfortable for them. But he was a bit too generous, and there were times when people would bring their grain to the mill to be milled and couldn't afford it, and he would do it without taking the money for it. And so eventually they became destitute because of that, and they ended up living in a place called the Cachot, which was a kind of disused prison cell. It's very small, not much bigger than some of the standard rooms that we have today. But she was a sickly child, and because of cholera and typhus and that within the village at the time, she was sent back to Bartres to the foster mother as an older girl, and she spent time there because she was very sickly. She had asthma, and Lourdes was not a good place to be. She went up to the mountains to help with her breathing and everything else. But eventually she came back to Lourdes. And when she was in Lourdes, her and her sister and a friend were sent down, and they were living in the Cachot, which is up the top of the town, on the top of the hill. And they were sent down to what would have been the forest area to find firewood. And when she was down collecting firewood, she had the first vision, but she didn't know what it was or who it was. But she had a vision in close by what was called the pigsty, which was the Roc de Mazabier, but it was basically a pigsty. And she had a vision there. She didn't know what it was or who it was, and that was in February, and she in 1858, I think it was, that she had this vision, and the 2 children that she was with didn't really know what was going on. They were there collecting the firewood. She was there in awe and ecstasy, looking at something that they couldn't see. But and she went back there, and there were several other visions, two other visions, and then this lady asked her to come back for a further 15 days, and eventually she would reveal who she was. So she saw this vision of this beautiful young lady, white, or dressed in white, speaking to her, but she was speaking to her, and over a period of time, her 2 friends were told not to tell anything. Of course, tell a child not to do something, and they would do it. So they told other people, who told other people, and then people began to follow her, and then they thought she was lying. They thought she was mad. They thought all sorts of things. But she persisted in going back, and her parents tried to stop her going back to the rock, the pigsty, to see this vision. And what the problem was that people couldn't see what she saw, but she became beatific. She was she changed physically. Her appearance changed, and she was separate from the whole what was going on around her. But she went back time after time to see the lady, and her parents tried to stop her. The local police tried to stop her. They wouldn't believe her, but she went back. And at one point, she was asked to get water to get the water, and so she went to the stream that was there, and the lady said to her no, and she had to dig in the ground, and she covered her face with mud, and people thought she'd gone completely loopy. But the spring sprang up from that, and people considered that to be a little miracle. And so she was always asked, ask the lady who she is. What's her name? What's her name? But the lady never said who she was. And it wasn't until the final apparition that the lady revealed who she was. And she revealed herself to be, and it was in Patois, which is a local dialect in the area, the Qui soit Immaculata Conceptia. And Bernadette was illiterate. She didn't go to school. She wasn't well enough to go to school. And when she was well enough, she had to look after her younger siblings. So she never went to school. And the lady said to Qui soit Immaculata Conceptia. And that translated into, I am the Immaculate Conception. Now, Bernadette didn't know what that meant. And the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception was relatively new in the Catholic Church at that time. And so she went to the priest, and he said to her, what's her name? And she said it back to him, and he realized that Bernadette was seeing Our Lady. And Our Lady gave her the message that she wanted people to come in procession, she wanted people to come in to do penance, and to wash in the water. And miracles started to happen. People went to wash in the water, and miracles started to happen. And there are not huge amounts of miracles, but there are many miracles that have been recognized as miracles by the Catholic Church. In other words, there is no scientific, medical, or rational explanation as to why these people have been cured, but they have been cured. And the apparitions went on from February through to March, and there were 18 of them in total. And so because of the water, because of Bernadette's story, Lourdes became a place of pilgrimage. And over time, it has built up and built up and built up. And of course, with all places of pilgrimage, you have a very commercial side to it. But within Lourdes itself, what they call the domain, which is where the site of the apparitions took place, and the surrounding area is all completely free of any kind of commercialism. And so it's a very spiritual place, and people go there to take part in the processions, to wash in the water, and to do penance. And they're still doing it. What's the maths? 1858, nearly 160 years? No, 260? I don't know. A long time.
A long time. They're doing it.
And,
and I've been listening.
It is an amazing. There's something about it. For me, there's something about it that when I go there, it's like going home. It's like going to my spiritual home. And I've been to lots of places, holy places around the world, but this is where it feels like home. It feels very special, and it feels like you're communing with your Maker in some form, but it's always to Jesus through Mary, and she is the conduit for building a closer, deeper relationship with Jesus Christ, Son of God, for Catholics. So, does that help, Jeff?
Yeah, man. Yeah, just saying what the attraction was.
And now, there's over 5 million people that go there every year. And, you can go there and look around and think, what is it about this place? And it's the depths of faith and belief. And I look at my favorite thing to do is to go to the grotto, but not to go to the grotto itself, to go to the other side of the River Garve, and sit opposite the grotto, because it's quieter and it's less busy, and there's less people, and just to sit and to watch and to look and to listen and to, I suppose, to pray in some way. And I think that whether or not you're a believer or not, that all those prayers must be doing something and must be going somewhere. And for all of the people who are there, truly, truly believing and praying, it has a profound effect on them. And I find that quite amazing, really. And it is the place where, being a teacher, the kind of school I taught in was a very intense environment. It was a highly academic school. It was a very successful school in terms of its examination outcome, but it was very intense. And it got to the point where I would start the organization of taking the next group of girls in September. And when it started to get to close to February, March time, and we'd done the preparation, we'd done the training, you began to think of what you would be doing and where you'd be doing and where you'd be going and what the experience would be. And so in my mind, I began to look forward to go there, because the spiritual energy, my spiritual battery was drained, and it needed recharging. And going there recharged the battery, and particularly going to the grotto at night when it's quiet and there's very few people around, and it's quiet and you've got bats flying around and you've got the sound of the river behind you and the grotto in front of you. The atmosphere is just beautiful, and it kind of just recharges the spiritual battery. And you could always tell it was running out, because around about February time, like, oh, I need something. But yeah, but
So
go on, sorry.
I was going to say, in the picture that we have that you gave us, your face is all painted,
Yeah.
and it's so. I did want to ask about: is this an activity that takes place in Lourdes for the children, by the teachers, by the extra helpers? Tell us the story behind that.
Well, as I said to you at the beginning, each group organises its own program, and as I said, there are spiritual activities. They take part in processions. On the Thursday, there's a big mass for the trust mass for the benefactors, to thank God for all the work of other people to get everybody there. That my face, as you call it, came about because one of our jobs was to go into a very dreary room underneath where the trust had its base for Lourdes, in Lourdes during the week. And underneath that, there was a very dull, dingy, dim room where lots of wheelchairs were stored. And it was our job to stay there all day, wait for people to come to collect their wheelchairs to assist children who maybe might need them during the week. And to be honest, it was a bit boring, because once they come, there was nothing else to do. And so there was one day we were there, and a couple of the girls I was with, they were painting each other's face, and they said, can we do your face, miss? I went, no, you can't do it, no, you can't do it. And it got to the point where we were so bored, I went, oh, all right then. So they painted my face. But the lovely thing about taking part in this pilgrimage is, as an adult, it's not very well looked upon when you do silly things and play silly games and dress up in silly costumes and have fun. And so the face painting is part of that, that when we take the children up to Bartres, there are teenagers up there who will paint their faces and play with them and all sorts of things. And then you'll have fancy dress parties where they paint all their faces and do all of that. So it's just part of the silly things that you do. But, you know, I was the teacher, I was the leader, I was the one who was cracking the whip and making them do all sorts of things. And I turned up with my tiger face. It was just fun. It was a funny thing to do. And I kept it on for quite a long time, much to the, I don't know what the word
Amusement?
was.
Disgust?
Well, amusement, yes, but in the hotel they weren't too pleased to have face paint on their sheets. But I kept it on for a while, and yeah, so that was me as a tiger. I like that picture. I thought it was a great bit of face painting they did there. It was good, very good.
Very good. Yeah. So now we know that you've mentioned it, that the HCPT is coming up to its 70th anniversary this coming Easter. So,
that's correct. Yeah. So there's yes, as I said, Dr. Michael Strode began taking the first group of children in 1956. Now, as I said, there are probably about 2,000 or 3,000 people, maybe more, because it's a big celebration, the 70th. And we are all, once again, congregating in Lourdes, traveling from all parts of the world to go there and to celebrate the founding of the trust and the work that it has done and the lives that it has touched in that time. And Lourdes is a place of pilgrimage, but it's also a place where miracles take place. But miracles aren't necessarily big miracles. And it's celebrating all of that work, or celebrating the life of Dr. Michael, who eventually went on to join the Cistercians. Once he retired, he went into the to Caldy Islands to become a Cistercian monk there, which is where he eventually lived out the rest of his life until he died a few years ago. And so it's celebrating his work, it's celebrating and remembering all those that have gone before and what they have done, and celebrating those that are there now, and hopefully into the future. But in these day and age, with all the, as they say, the financial constraints and the cost of living, it becomes more and more difficult to maintain that ethos of taking children on pilgrimage, not charging them, the challenges of raising the money, the challenges of the cost of the travel, all sorts of things make it increasingly difficult. But yes, we are all congregating beginning on the 5th of April until 11th and 12th of April, congregating there to take part in a pilgrimage holiday with Mary.
You when you were describing that, you talked about miracles, and some are not big miracles. What are the kind of miracles that you're referring to there? What would people consider to be a miracle? The miracles of Lourdes or the miracles that come about through the pilgrimage to Lourdes that you've witnessed, that other people have told you about?
Well, you have, I call them the big miracles, the ones that the church investigates and eventually will recognize as miracles that for which there are no explanations. And as I said, there aren't loads and loads and loads of those that are recognized, but they are still going on. And periodically there is one that is investigated and eventually confirmed as no other explanation for it. But there's the little miracles in life, take place, and they are probably much more profound and much more. They are life-changing. So, for example, in some of my early times taking the girls, I worked with a group where there was a little boy in that particular group who went to a special school, as they were called, but was considered to be uneducable, they not able to learn anything. And he was 8 years old, and he didn't really communicate that well. He was in nappies, so he was doubly incontinent, but he was part of the pilgrimage, and he was there. And there was one night this little lad was being put to bed, and I was helping his helper to put him to bed, and he was trying to get him to clean his teeth, and David wouldn't and couldn't clean his teeth. And I was helping him, and I was going, oh, come on, David, you can do it. It's easy to do. All you have to do is this. And I showed him how to put the toothpaste on the toothbrush, and then literally going like this, up and down, up and down, up and down with his teeth. And we managed to get him to clean his teeth. And then the next night you did the same thing again, and it was almost like you went back to square one. By the end of the week, we had him cleaning his teeth. Between the two of us, we'd got him to clean his teeth, and he was absolutely beside himself with joy that he could clean his teeth. And he went home, and he managed to show his parents how he cleaned his teeth, and he managed to show his teachers how he could clean his teeth. He didn't do a great job, I have to say, but he was doing it all properly in his own little way. And suddenly that opened a door to him, because he had learnt something. And you would never think learning to clean your teeth could change your life. But for him, it changed his life, because it meant, and I'm talking kind of like the late 80s, early 90s, but it meant that this child, who was thought to be beyond education and beyond learning anything, could learn something. And so I didn't really know what he went on to do and become, but the fact that he learned to clean his teeth meant that he could learn to do other simple basic tasks, and to gain a level of independence. And it changed his life. And that's what I mean by little miracles. And you see it all the time in the children that go come to Lourdes, are brought to Lourdes, that for some of them, they are very, very shy, very retiring. They don't communicate, or don't have the skills to communicate. And somehow, in some way, being together in that environment with people who are solely there for that child, and show love and care to somebody else's child in an intense way, somehow affects those children and changes them. And many, many times I have seen children who have come shy, retired, scared at the beginning of the week, and who by the end of the week have blossomed and have changed, and go home and tell their parents and their family about the experience they have, and it has changed their life. But it's not just about the children, it's about the young people that I took or brought with me or invited to come with me to Lourdes. Those teenagers, some of whom had all sorts of emotional baggage and all sorts of things with them, suddenly found that not focusing on themselves but on others changed them somehow. And many of them discovered what they wanted to do in life and what vocation they wanted to follow. And there were many that, because of going on the pilgrimage, decided to become teachers or go into occupational health or physiotherapy or nursing or become doctors or go on in some way to change the world for the good in just a little bit. And to me, that is part of the miracle of Lourdes. It's not just about the big miracles, it's about how people are changed in some way by that experience, which stays with them for the rest of their lives. And they don't necessarily talk about it, but it does change them. And it may be that for some people, I took many children who were atheists. I always thought that was hilarious. Well, not hilarious, but I found it very intriguing that children who were atheists wanted to go on a pilgrimage. And it was, no, I'm not going on because of the spiritual bit. I just want to go and help people. That's fine, come along and help people. But they weren't allowed to opt out on the spiritual side. You know, you bought into it. If you were coming, you bought into the whole package. And like it or not, they were involved in that, because if they're going to be in a family group, they do what the family group does. And if that means going to walk the Stations of the Cross, or going to wash in the water, or going to pray, they went with them. They didn't have to do it, but they went with them, and somehow they were exposed to it. And so I always found that intriguing, that aspect of it. But even those children, atheists as they were touched by that deep spiritual side. And they didn't necessarily go off and believe in God. I wouldn't claim that by any means, but it did touch them and it did move them. And again, I would say that's another little bit of a miracle. Yeah, so miracles don't have to be big, blasty, blousy, in your facey type things. They're just somehow you're changed by what you've experienced for the better. And
Okay.
yeah.
So when I listen to you talk about the extra helpers that are coming, that go on the pilgrimage with you, at 16 and 17 years of age, would it be fair to say that this is probably one of their first experiences of joining another family that isn't their own family, the family that they've grown up in, and that too is an act of independence that's taking place?
Yes, it is. And some of those youngsters that I took went on to join the family groups and to become members of those family groups and to return time and time again as carers. But the way it worked with my girls was that they weren't old enough to be allocated a specific child, and they weren't involved in the preparation that there is in bringing a child, somebody else's child. Because when you take somebody else's child abroad or take somebody else's child away, it's a huge responsibility, a massive responsibility. And as the teacher, I felt that enormously, that, you know, if something happened, and I always said to them, you have to follow these rules. And there weren't many rules that I had, but you have to follow the rules, because if you don't follow the rules, if something happens to you, they're not going to ask you, they're going to ask me. And it's the same with the groups that take other people's children away, that it's that responsibility, and we never put that on our girls. But when they went, they were they helped in whatever way was needed. So they would play with the children, they'd look after the children. They may help put them to bed. They would help feed them. They would take them shopping. They would do all sorts of things. As I said earlier, not involved in intimate care, but involved in the daily care of that child on a much more general way. And they very quickly became fully involved and committed to their family group. And they would come back at the end of the day and talk about what they'd done and what little Tina or Johnny or Frida or Fred or whoever it was, what they had done and what they'd seen them do, and how they wouldn't talk to them and then they were suddenly talking to them. And that kind of profound experience, truly, truly moved them. But it was very much about going into a family. And I was quite cruel, kind to be cruel, cruel to be kind, because I would tell them, we were always went through a long period of preparation of going into the story of Lourdes, going into the trust and what it did, all the safeguarding and everything that the trust had in place. We went through all of that. We did manual handling. We did, how to help somebody brush their teeth, how you feed somebody, all sorts of things. So basic preparation. But part of that preparation was, I would say to them, I will take you to your family group and I will walk away. And you will either sink or swim. And they would look at me and go, no, she's not, no, you wouldn't do that. But I did. And I did it every student, sorry. And sometimes there were 8, sometimes there were 25, 26. They were always in pairs. I always had them in a pair. So they always had a friend that they chose. I didn't pair them up. They paired up themselves. And I would take the 2 of them to the group. And I knew these groups. I knew these groups very well. I built up relationships with these groups over all those years. So I trusted the group leaders implicitly, and I knew what I was putting them into. But they did not know what they were going into. I did. And I would take them to the hotel. So we would arrive Easter Monday, because we traveled by train in those days. We traveled by train, or we come flown in. Later on, we flew in. And so by the end of the day, I would take them. So after dinner in the evening, I would take them round, and we'd all trot round Lourdes, all the different hotels. And gradually, my little herd of sheep would become smaller and smaller. And we would go into the hotel, go up to the floor where the groups were living in for the week, and I would introduce them to the group leader, and I'd introduce the girls and say, here you are, girls, come back to the hotel when you're ready, but you need to be back by X time. Make sure somebody comes back with you. And I'd walk away, and then I would go off to the next hotel and do exactly the same thing. So they were thrown in at the deep end. Why am I talking about this? I can't remember now. But they were thrown in at the deep end, and it was sink or swim. And it was up to them to start putting themselves, to step out of their comfort zone. But I trusted implicitly the group leader and the group that I was putting them in, that they equally would embrace them with open arms and make them feel exceptionally welcome. And right or wrong, the formula worked and worked well.
And were there many that sank, or did they all actually swim in the end?
No, not many sank. Some, it became obvious during the week, very early on in the week, but obvious during the week, that the reasons for them being there were not the best reason for them being there, and they didn't want to do what the group wanted them to do. They wanted to do what they wanted to do, and they didn't like the idea that they might have to push a wheelchair, or they might have to carry boxes of stuff around. They went, well, that's not what I wanted to do. And so they would kind of disengage from the process. But I must have taken possibly over the years 400 or 500 sixth formers on those pilgrimages every year. Over the years, maybe 400 to 500. I don't know, it might be a bit lower than that. But of those, I could probably count on one hand those that disengage like that.
So just 1%.
A very small percentage, percentage. But most of them were deeply moved by it, and they would come back excited at the end of the day. rushing up, wanting to tell you what they'd done and what they'd been involved in and what so-and-so had done and how they couldn't do it and now they could do it. And it was just wonderful to actually behold and to see how they themselves were being changed by the experience. And they, you know, they had the great social side as well. It wasn't all work and no play. You know, they had their social side. They could go out to the cafes in the evening and have their sing-songs and everything else that they wanted to do. And that was all part of it, because they weren't the only ones. There were we were called the Central Support Group in the end. And there are dozens, probably 20 central support groups that were like us, that were students from other schools or students from universities that came on the pilgrimage and then went into family groups and to help. But the helping wasn't just about the family groups. They had to do boring things. They had to, in the early days, they used to have to stand in the Rosary Square and hold a piece of rope and guide people on the right path to go and join the beginning of a procession. They would have to, what other thing? Oh, they'd have to go and sit in an underground room giving out wheelchairs to the odd person who turned up, or they'd have to go and help with the shop, or they'd have to go and, I don't know, they did all sorts of basic jobs that without them doing that made the pilgrimage a bit less. So the fact that they were holding a piece of rope to them was like, I don't want to go and hold a piece of rope in the rain. But you do it because it's not for you, it's about what you're helping other people to experience. And so they did lots of things like that. They in the early days, when we used to do what they call the high stations, which were stations of the cross, which depict the journey of Jesus from arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane to crucifixion, and these were up the side of a mountain, and you can still see them in Lourdes. They're still there. The beautiful tableaus of life-size scenes from that final journey of Jesus. But it was up the side of a mountain, and in the early days, a lot of the first couple of days of the work we did was going and standing at the bottom of these stations of the cross, waiting for the family groups to come to them, and then literally attaching ropes to their wheelchairs to haul them, help push and pull largely up to these stations, and then for the children to see and hear that account of that pilgrimage that Jesus made to death, to see those statues and to pray them with the children, but have that physical, and boy was it tiring. I did it loads of times. I then quite enjoyed sending them off to do it and not doing it myself. And as I got older, it's like, oh, I can't do that anymore.
So we have the mundane and the profound meeting each other.
Yeah. And you know, you were going up the side of a mountain to the very top. Well, it felt like a mountain. It probably was just a very, very big hill, but it felt like a mountain. But then you have to come down the other side. So all the pulling and everything that you were doing on the way up, you had to reverse, and you had to become the brakes, the additional brakes on the wheelchairs going down. But again, it was that little journey had again a profound impact. Sharing that spiritual journey with the family groups and the children, but that was part of the physical side of it, you know, the things that they would never have done before, and they would never experience before, and it was tough, and many of us went, sadly, that the trust no longer allow the family groups to do that. If you are able-bodied, you can go and do it yourself, and it's still a challenge. It's still quite a hike, quite a climb, but it then was deemed, because it was a kind of part of the pathway was unmade and it was a bit rocky and a bit bumpy. It was, you know, it became not safe to do it, which was a shame, because the experience was profound. And it was a shame that it couldn't be done. I would still take my girls to walk the Stations of the Cross, because they are quite remarkable. But the children weren't allowed to do it anymore because it was deemed not to be safe, particularly if you were in a wheelchair. And it was all right going up, but it was the coming down was quite it was a bit steep and a bit dangerous, I suppose.
So as we look forward to this Easter coming, will you be going to the 70th anniversaries this year?
Yes, we are going. Myself and my husband are going. Since I retired from teaching in August 2021. Stephen had a role called Chief Brancardier, which was organising and directing the work of the additional helpers, the central support group helpers, doing all sorts of things, largely to do with the processions and helping the family groups get on coaches to go on outings and things like that, or working at Hosanna House. So in the early days, he continued to do that. And then that role changed, and I wanted to continue going, but I couldn't be part of the school group anymore, and rightly so. I couldn't be part of that anymore. So I had to find myself a new role. And so I became part for the last, not last year because I didn't travel last year, but the 2 years before, I became part of what they call the medical liaison team, which is a team of nurses, and they were on 24-hour call, and the nurses in the family groups could phone them up if they had a problem with children that were ill, or they needed advice, or they maybe didn't have a nurse in their group, and they would go and help the children, help the group look after the children. And my role in that group was to be the call handler, which was quite fun.
Nice.
So I would take the calls and then farm it out to the nursing team to take care of. But I could also, if I knew the answer, I could give the answer. So I'd been to Lourdes so many times, I kind of knew where all the pharmacies were, where you could go and buy nappies if you needed to buy them, how to get there. So you'd answer all sorts of questions. So
again, the mundane.
Yeah, the mundane. And
the mundane.
When you have to stay in town on the end of a phone, waiting for somebody to call, who may or may not call, and then have it overnight a couple of nights, praying that nobody would call in the middle of the night.
So tell me, what are you most looking forward to in your upcoming pilgrimage?
I think going back, I'm going to be helping in the shop this time, because the trust create their own little shop when they sell their own little goodies, HCPT merchandise sort of thing. So I'll be helping out in that. But it's just going back to the place and looking forward to going and sitting on the other side of the river, looking at the grotto, and taking part in the Torchlight procession on the Thursday, taking part in the benefactors mass on the Thursday, and just being there and seeing people where you haven't seen them for a year or maybe 2 years, and you go and you say hello and you pick up where you left off, so you've never been apart. And it's that I'm looking forward to. And
wonderful. If anybody who's been listening is inspired to take themselves off to Lourdes, what would you suggest to them?
I would recommend, if they wanted to join a family group and do some of the things that I've been talking about, then they should go to the HCPT website, and there are links on that where it says get involved, think it says get involved, or learn more about, get involved. And there's a section on that. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find. There's a section on that you can find your nearest group. And if you click on that and put in your postcode, it will show you all of the different groups that are located within that area, because all the groups are divided up into regions. And so you will find groups that are in your region. But the best thing is probably to contact the HCPT directly, the umbrella organisation directly. And you don't have to be Catholic, you don't have to be Christian. The children don't have to be Catholic or Christian, they can be of any faith or no faith at all. But as long as
Is there an organisation, is there one in Australia?
There was, I think, talk of starting one in Australia, but there is the logistics of one coming from Australia. But they come from America, so it's not beyond the pale. And they would be part of the international HCPT, and there are slightly different rules for those about how that is done. But there's no reason why they couldn't come from Australia. It's just the challenge and the logistics would be a bit harder, but there's no reason why not. Yeah, you can go on to HCPT website. It's under find your nearest group, but the best thing to do is probably just contact them. And if you want to try and become a helper, then there's no reason why you can't, but you have to go through a whole safeguarding procedure, because that's very, very important. You know, you can't just be any random person. You have to go through their procedures. And you have to be fully committed to the group and wanting to be involved in the fundraising. It's a commitment, it's a huge commitment. And you have to pay for your own travel. So
all right, mate. Thank you for coming on tonight. Appreciate that. Very brilliant. Lourdes, particularly about the visions. I think that was really the key to the whole subject.
Yeah.
Why he wants to go to Lourdes, you know.
Well, it's the reason why you go.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I wish you well, especially this Easter, that you recharge your batteries and that you have
a bit flat at the moment. Yeah, needs a bit of oomph.
Well, recharge them, be inspired, and keep on doing what you're doing. It's enormous work. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I didn't think I could talk for so long, but there you go.
Given a little challenge, off you go. Thank you very, very much, Patricia. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Australia, for listening. And we'll see you again next week.
Very good.
Bye for now.